Ordinary ingredients to make extraordinary food. Ordinary ingredients, extraordinary food. Ordinary ingredients.
I'm so ready to watch that.
Welcome to another edition of Think Out of the Can, where we challenge you to take ordinary ingredients and create extraordinary food. I've been rehearsing.
Wow,
Did you like that one?
I love that one.
You know what? You're really going to love this one. You know why?
Why?
Because we have something so simple that's so exciting for you. The ordinary tomato.
The ordinary tomato.
And this ordinary beautiful tomato comes in a lot of different varieties. We have soup, and we have crushed tomato, diced tomatoes.
Tomato puree. We got ketchup, tomato soup. And so today's episode of Think Out of the Can is called Just Tomatoes. Anyway, this was yet another kind of interesting challenge. Especially, and you got to hang on because the dessert was the most challenging and the most unique. So we're going to start with a tomato and hash brown breakfast casserole.
Yummy.
So I'm taking regular, old, ordinary hash brown patties. They come frozen, so what you got to do is you got to bake them until they're golden brown because otherwise they're just raw. And I'm simply going to put them into the bottom of this baking dish. Now, this is a small baking dish. You're going to want to put, of course, into a regular size baking dish, but make sure it's oven proof.
This is going to be an exciting one because we have this big of a container, and we've got this many ingredients. So
Yep,
we'll
it's a
see
lot
the
of
magic.
ingredients. So that's the first thing I'm doing is just really pressing it down in there. Each one of the ingredients I want to make sure I press down because, like Kim said, there's a lot of ingredients. The next thing is I'm going to put in, I'm going to put in some chopped spinach. Now you can use fresh spinach if you want. You can use, frozen spinach, which is what I'm using right now because we have just planted our gardens and the spinach is not up there yet. But same thing, I'm going to press it in there. Make sure it's all evenly distributed.
A breakfast casserole is always good, especially when you have a church event and you can make it for a lot of people. So
Yep.
It's really good to be able to put all those ingredients together and think of all the vegetables you get in there.
Well, and that's the thing is, it's going to have all the food groups. And so if you don't like spinach, well, guess what? This is a way to kind of just hide it in there and make sure you're getting a little bit of that iron nutrition, just like Popeye.
Hey,
And
you
so-
can even put in there mustard greens, right?
Yeah, sure. Once again, I've got it pressed in there and evenly distributed. The next thing is breakfast sausage. I buy the 1 pound bulk breakfast sausage, and then you cook it until it's nice and brown, and that's the next layer. So same thing. I want to make sure that I've got it evenly distributed everywhere. There's not a whole lot of cooking involved with this. Of course, you have to cook the sausage, but for time reasons, I already have it cooked. Again, I want to make sure that I have it evenly distributed and topped everywhere.
See how he does it so perfectly chefy?
Well, and
So
remember,
perfectly chefy.
and even though she said chefy, none of these recipes are chefy recipes. These are just creative ways to use the food assistance food, or you can just say, a lot of the canned and non-perishable foods. So here's the next layer, looking really nice. The next layer I'm going to use are diced tomatoes.
And remember, this is about substitution. So if you don't have an ingredient, use something else in your cabinet, for that ingredient. It's about being creative and creating.
So yeah, and so in this instance, I've used canned diced tomatoes, but you can chop up a tomato and use those diced tomatoes. It doesn't really matter. Alrighty, so now I'm going to get into the real heavy duty stuff. I'm going to take egg. If it's a breakfast casserole, you pretty much got to have egg. So I'm going to pour the egg into a bowl I'm going to add cheese. And, this is shredded cheddar cheese. You can use shredded Velveeta. You can use, pepper jack, whatever you want to use. I'm adding a mixture just simply of salt, pepper, and just a little bit of garlic powder and milk. Now, I know that I always say mix everything when you put it in, but this is all a combined item.
Now,
So
could
now
you use powdered milk? Powdered milk, like with milk and
you
powdered
could, but
milk and water?
you'd have to reconstitute it with water. So I'm going to mix it all together. I'm going to pour that in here. And as I pour it, I want to press it in until I can see that it is fully saturated, which means that all of the egg is going to be all the way down, and it's going to bake almost like a quiche. I think is a good way of putting it. Once I have that on top there, I'm going to add a little bit of Parmesan cheese.
That is looking really yummy.
It is looking yummy.
And, it says breakfast casserole, but you could do this for dinner,
Yeah.
maybe for lunch, brunch.
You don't have to use Parmesan cheese if you don't want. I'm going to now finally top it with a little more of the shredded cheese. When you bake this, make sure that you have it on some kind of cookie sheet or something underneath, because when it bakes, it's going to tend to bubble over just a little bit in order for it to get hot enough for it to be ready for you to eat. So always do that, because otherwise, if it bubbles over, or when it bubbles over, I should say, then it's going to go on the bottom of your oven, and that's a pretty difficult thing to clean. And then finally, since it's titled Just Tomatoes, I'm going to finish it with some sliced tomatoes.
It's so funny. This is so tiny.
Yeah.
You would make it as a big dish, but we had to make it small because it's for a sample.
And so you bake that at 350 degrees for probably about 20-25 minutes. But the telltale is going to be that the cheese is all melted, and you're going to see the ingredients, all the mixture is going to bubble up, and also the egg is going to puff up and rise. So you're going to be able to tell. Now, the safest way to do it is you have a thermometer that you calibrate. And how do you calibrate a thermometer? You put it in a bunch of ice with a little bit of water in a glass, and it should temp down to 32 degrees. If your thermometer temps down to 32 degrees, then you're good. And if not, then you can adjust it accordingly. So anyway, here is the finished product before it goes into the oven. And voila, that is the final finished product. You see it's nice and browned on top, and all the cheese is melted. And let me say, that's really good eating. So this is a hash brown and tomato breakfast casserole with sausage.
Now, our famous life point. Our life point number 1 is new day. What about a new day?
Well, today is a new day. And you know what God says in Psalm 118:24?
What does he say?
Today is the day that he has made, and we should rejoice and be glad in it.
So Proverbs 1:7 is what I chose. Is the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. So I chose this verse because I wanted to take tomatoes and use that for new day. So we wanted to talk about the benefits, the health benefits of the tomato, and how is that going to be combined? Because tomatoes are very healthy for you.
Is tomato a fruit or a vegetable?
What do you say?
It's a vegetable, right? No. Believe it or not, tomato is a fruit.
Well, and the great thing is, a lot of times if you open up the fruit and you look at the seeds, you look at the center, it kind of tells you like the area that it's good for you. And this has lines. And so I'm thinking that part of when God made the tomato, it is sun rays in your body, healthy So the benefits
And
are,
that is, I must say, that is the perfect tomato. That is the perfect tomato. How did you find that?
I searched for a beautiful, perfect tomato.
I hope that all the tomatoes that you planted and that we have in our gardens are going to produce good tomatoes like that.
So what do you think you get from what does a tomato do for you? It boosts your immunity.
Mm-hmm.
It prevents strokes.
Wow.
And you can all look this up yourself, research what is the health benefits of tomato. Protects your lungs, promotes digestion. It's good for anti-aging. It's good for your skin. It promotes cell development. It's antioxidant, and it has a lot of fiber.
What vitamins does it have?
Vitamin C, vitamin K, and vitamin B.
And so it's interesting. It's got vitamin C. It is a real good source of vitamin C. And I guess that's part of why it's considered a fruit instead of a vegetable.
So the lonely tomato is very important to our health.
Amen. Well, moving on to our second one. This is growing up in New York. Now, I didn't like anything that had tomatoes. I was a very picky eater, but I certainly wasn't going to eat tomato soup. It just didn't. I would eat like chicken noodle soup is like as far as I would go with soup. And anyway, so I didn't know that tomato soup and grilled cheese, or grilled cheese and tomato soup, was such a standard item. Like everybody nationally, it didn't matter whether you were in New York or Oregon or Texas, that it's just a common pairing is grilled cheese and tomato soup. So I put together this recipe, which is grilled cheese and tomato bake. So it has all the ingredients of grilled cheese and tomato soup, and it's all in one thing. So this is very simple. It's very easy.
Well, part of the reason why we're doing these recipes is because how many of us have tomatoes in our pantry right now? Some sort of tomato. We've got a hand in the audience. You have ketchup, so you could possibly use ketchup. You just have to make sure it's not too sweet, but you want to make sure that you use what you have, what you're given.
Yeah, spaghetti sauce or pasta sauce or marinara sauce or pizza sauce, whichever, diced tomatoes. Rotel is a name brand for diced tomatoes and green chilies, which are a little bit spicier than just regular diced tomatoes. You have tomato puree, tomato paste. All these different ingredients. I'm just going to use tomato soup, and I'm not thinning it out. When you make tomato soup from the can, it says use 1 can of tomato soup and then 1 can or maybe 2/3 of a can of water so that it thins it out, because this is concentrate. But for this recipe, I'm using just straight tomato soup. And
so our film crew said they're having tomato soup and grilled cheese for lunch.
Oh yeah, we made it.
And they were super excited, and one of our film crew said that they had tomato soup for 2 weeks straight.
Wow.
I know, they loved it so much.
Wow.
So I'm not gonna tell you who it is, but I'll tell you, she's like gung ho about tomato soup.
Well, and I can say that with all the work that they do with filming and editing and writing on the board, certain things like smile more, or what's a substitution for onions. They do a lot of work in order to get these videos onto social media. Mm-hmm. So I decided yesterday that we were going to make the breakfast casserole for them, just for them. They have their own. It's in a pie pan, and afterwards they're going to hopefully enjoy what I made. So I put in the regular tomato soup. I've got a combination of salt, pepper, a little bit of Italian seasoning, not much, and some garlic seasoning. I'll mix it together. The next is, I just used like day-old bread. No matter whether you have, sliced white bread, you have a hamburger roll, a hot dog bun, whatever.
The heel of the bread.
Yeah, the heel of the bread.
Nobody eats.
Excuse me, I eat. I love the heel of the bread, especially when I make toast out of it. But anyway, so just let it air dry, or you can put it in the oven for like 10 minutes and crisp it up a little bit, because if it's just straight bread, it's going to get ultra soggy. So, I just made it a little bit crusty by letting it air dry. But again, you can put it in the oven for about 10 minutes. So I'm adding that. mixing it together. I mean, this is so darn easy. You know, I got to laugh. Sometimes I say I shouldn't even get paid to be a chef because some of the things I do are just really simple. But it means that, you don't have to have these fancy, 12 ingredient recipes. This is all about being creative with food assistance food or canned food or boxed food with a couple of fresh ingredients. So I've got the tomato soup, just, the concentrate, not added any water. I've got seasoning, salt, pepper, a little Italian seasoning, and garlic powder. I've got the bread that I chunked up and dried. And finally, you can't have grilled cheese without cheese.
What I like about this is we have tomato soup. You can substitute that with ketchup, whatever you have. You have bread that is a day old, a week old. As long as it's not moldy, you can chop that up. And you've got cheese. I mean, how much easier can that be?
And Kim is right. It's just these are easy.
Oh, and one other thing that you have for the very top.
Yeah. So this is what it looks like, and just basically you can put this in the oven, 350 degrees, again for probably about 20 minutes, and you'll know when the tomato soup starts to bubble, and you can see that the cheese is melted. And then the final thing is, now this is not in a grilled cheese and tomato soup, but we're going to top it with some French fried onions, or you don't have to. And the final product is pretty tasty looking. And I'll tell you what, when I baked this, it was really, really tasting really good. And so that is the grilled cheese and tomato bake topped with French fried onions.
We're on to our second life point.
Wow, you want to stay here? You want to go out front?
To go out front.
Well, go
A
ahead.
little conversation. So our life point number 2 is new way. We've had new day. Now we're on to new way. Proverbs 4:23 is above all else, guard your heart. For everything you do flows from it.
Wow.
And so let's think about tomatoes, good for the heart, good for the soul.
Mhm.
And so
And good for the stomach.
good for the stomach. When we eat our, eat food, maybe sometimes some of that might go into our mind and think about the health benefits, and then also what the Bible says. It's a good time to reflect on God's word anyway, because you're just sitting there and taking it in and calming down and making it a space to where you can just be peaceful. Because a lot of times I feel in life we're really busy and we're doing one project and the next project, and we're running here and we got this job and we got to take care of the kids, and slowing down a little bit is always important. And so with, Proverbs 4:23, guard your heart above all else, for everything you do flows from it. I mean, everything comes from the heart. You're mad at somebody, you are angry, you don't forgive, it's going to
You
come
like
out
somebody and love somebody.
it's going to all come out from your emotions. So making sure that keeping that peaceful place makes that heart be supple, because just like our skin can get wrinkly if we don't use enough lotion, it's the same thing. Words that come in, even things you watch on TV, those things that come in your mind, your body, your spirit, they affect you.
Well, I mean, when you find out a friend, has surgery, or your one of your relatives got sick, your heart hurts and feels for them.
Right, exactly. And now it seems like nowadays there's a lot of sadness. And so keeping a place of peace for yourself, and yes, being concerned for other people, but also remembering that we're all on a journey ourselves. And it's important to focus our journey to God, because that's where the peace comes in.
And remember, our friend Chef Scotty, and I will say, talk about the heart.
Oh, yes.
On Monday, it was his 6th anniversary of getting a heart transplant. And he is my closest, nearest, and dearest friend. He's been a chef friend of mine, plus a dear friend. And he did for years for a home builder company. He was the face of the home builders, not as a builder, but as a chef. And he would say, the kitchen is the heart of the home. And that sold a lot of homes. So you think about the heart there in your home. And nowadays, when they build homes, the kitchen used to be this kind of closet enclosed area that the cooking was going on, and it was not involved in any of the social activities. And now every single house that's built, the kitchen is wide open. It's an open air kitchen. because everybody wants to be a part of the food being cooked and talking to whoever's cooking.
And when you get a heart transplant, you think your heart is coming from another human being, what they had to lose for you to gain. And it's funny because Tim spent all week contacting Scotty because his alarm would go off on his phone, and he contact Scotty and say,
It was reminding me of his anniversary of getting this new heart.
say, congratulations, Scotty, for receiving your heart 5 years ago. He's like, today's not the day. So we've spent all week talking to Scotty and thinking about, getting a heart transplant and what does that look like. And so to be able to bring this to you is really important, because that's what makes our bodies thrive too.
New day, new life.
Yes.
All righty. So the next one, I guess I need the good old-fashioned cooker now.
Oh, that first one looks really good. It looks like pepperonis on top. The tomatoes look like pepperoni.
Okay, since I'm cooking, I'm going to get the pot heated, and I'm going to get some oil started, because I'm going to saute. This is navy beans and tomatoes, and sorry, I had a little notice from one of the directors here. So navy beans and tomatoes. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to saute or fry, whatever you want to call it, onions and celery and a little bit of garlic. They're called the aromatics. They're the flavor agents that really start soups, sauces, beans. And so I want to make sure that the oil is getting nice and hot, not screaming hot. And the way that I'm going to check is, since the first ingredient I'm going to use and put in there is onion, I'm going to take one onion, put it in there, and it's doing the happy dance. It's doing the happy dance. The oil is hot enough for it to start to sizzle. If the oil wasn't hot enough, and I always mention this on these classes, if the oil's not hot enough, then the onions are just going to absorb the oil, and you're going to get that raw, oily flavor. So these are starting to sizzle really well. Next thing I'm going to do is add some celery, diced up celery.
He does it so perfect. It's its perfect size. Every one is the perfect size.
Hey, almost 50 years of practicing. So I want to get them cooking for about maybe 3 minutes. And your telltale is that the onions are going to turn from the white color to like almost a translucent, almost silvery color.
Well, the funny thing is, whenever we're cooking together and I'm doing a lot of the sous chef and I'm cutting up the vegetables, Tim will say, do a pico de gallo size.
Yeah, that's,
And I love that, because you get that image in your mind of the size instead of dice it a 1/4 inch or.
Yeah, and that's it. The actual size of the dice is a 1/4 inch. But what are you going to take a tape measure out? And so I say, just cut them pico de gallo size. And most of us down south, and I'm sure up in New York now, know what pico de gallo is. Anyway, so the onions are looking translucent. So the next thing I'm going to add is the chopped garlic, and I don't put the garlic in with the onions and celery because garlic burns quickly, and as soon as it burns, you got this really bitter flavor, and it's going to flavor everything. So
what temperature do you have this on?
Well, I mean, medium high. My recipes say heat the oil on medium high until it's hot and starts to ripple. You can literally see the oil do this kind of ripple thing. But again, to make sure that it's the right temperature, drop a piece of onion or celery in there, and if it starts to sizzle and do the happy dance, you're good to go. So I only want to cook the garlic for maybe about a minute, just enough to get the raw flavor out. If I just threw the garlic in there and started adding the other ingredients, it would kind of keep a very raw garlic flavor. And when you saute or fry garlic, it tends to be a little bit sweeter, just like onion. So, and also I can smell it no longer. It no longer smells like raw garlic. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm putting ham in here. If you have sausage, you can use sausage.
And it doesn't have to be any certain size ham. It can be a ham steak. It can
Yeah.
be a couple pieces of ham.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
And you know what? You don't even have to have the ham. I put it in because, it's Typically, in old school days, even now, when you make any type of bean or legume, you put in a ham hock to give it that smoky flavor. So I'm kind of getting,
Put sausage in here.
yeah, I'm getting flavor out of it. I'm putting a little protein in there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the beans. These are navy beans, but again, you can use pinto beans, you can use kidney beans. This just happens to be navy beans.
Well, and part of the reason why I wanted the navy beans is because a lot of times when you get food bank food from the food pantry, from the food bank, you don't know exactly what to do with a navy bean. It's a white color bean. It's no different than a pinto bean.
See, up north, up in New York, I mean, navy beans were pretty standard. They really were, whereas pinto beans are more a southern type of bean. Of course, you go to a Mexican restaurant, they have, charro beans or frijoles a la charra. So anyway, yeah, I like that idea because, navy beans or canela beans, the white beans aren't used that often. So now that they're all cooking, I'm going to add a little bit of broth. It can be chicken broth, it could be vegetable broth. Let all that stuff cook together. It doesn't take long because these are canned beans. If you want to use dry beans, then the thing is you want to make sure you soak them for at least maybe 3-4 hours or overnight, and it softens them a little bit so the cooking process is not as long. But these canned beans, because it is one of the things they're giving out in this month's food pantry, they're ready to go. So I don't have to cook this very long.
Oh, and did you drain these beans?
What's that?
Did you drain these beans?
Yeah. Any beans, potatoes, anything that's canned, you want to drain them. You want to rinse them real well with cold water until they run clear, and then you can use them. So now I'm going to put in my seasoning. I'm only using salt, pepper, and bay leaf. Bay leaf is great. I think that you should put bay leaf in every single soup that you make. It just gives it this unique kind of, almost like a floral flavor. So I've got
rice.
And rice.
You always put
Oh yeah,
bay
I
leaf
do.
in rice.
Yeah, I put it in rice too. It just gives us a little. It's an essence. It's not a strong flavor. So I'm going to turn it down now because it doesn't need to cook anymore. Finally, I'm going to add diced tomatoes
Tomatoes.
because this is just tomatoes. That's the name of today's cooking class. Again, you can use canned tomatoes, you can use diced fresh tomatoes, you can use tomatoes with green chilies to make it a little spicier. And it's ready to go. I mean, it's just as simple as that. It's just as simple as that. And then I guess I had this thing about French fried onions. So for grins, I decided to put them on top. Now, I didn't put it on top of this because I really wanted to show you what the beans and tomatoes look like. But if you want to, you can just put the French fried onions on top.
Well, what I like about the French fried onions is that they're preserved, so you can keep them in your cabinet to add flavor to your food.
Yeah.
To where.
Well, and texture. When you watch these food shows, they talk about two things in addition to what you're cooking that everything really needs to have. I'm not talking about desserts. They always talk about texture and acidity. And so like with this, the tomatoes are going to bring a little bit of acidity, and of course the French fried onions are going to give it some texture. And so there you have it, navy beans with tomatoes.
We're on to our life point number 3, but before we talk about the life point number 3, I want to talk about the fact that you have 1 tomato here. And in canned tomatoes, in a 14-ounce canned tomato, so this is 10 ounce. So in a 14-ounce can of tomatoes, you get 2 cups of tomato. No, I'm sorry, 6 small tomatoes in 1 can.
And so think about this, a can.
Or a pound.
Yeah, or a pound of tomatoes. And I wanted to jump in and say that when we buy these, you can buy name brands, or you can buy, Walmart brand or H-E-B brand or whatever, and really they're the same thing. You pay more for a name brand, and if you feel more comfortable with that, then that's fine. But, I bought that can of diced tomatoes, I think it was 69 cents. So think about the fact that you can get a canned prepared item for 69 cents, or let's say under $1, that has 6 tomatoes in there, or a pound of tomatoes. So
Now they're not this big.
Yeah,
They're the small tomatoes. But
okay, but think about this. Somebody has to plant the seed, water the seed. The Apostle Paul says that some are meant to plant, some are meant to water, but God is the one who yields the harvest or the increase. But think about, for 69 cents or under $1, 6 tomatoes, you have someone to plant the seed, someone to water the seed. They have to go around and in the farms check the plants and make sure they don't have any insects or pests and so on. And then when they ripen, somebody's got to plant them. Pick them.
Where did this all start from? We were doing a class, and we asked the young people in our class, where do tomatoes come from? Now they live in the city,
No.
so I'm not.
Oh yeah, right.
Not a tomato. I'm sorry. Where do
Peaches.
peaches come from? They live in the city, so I will give them that. But because their parents went to the food bank all the time and they didn't get fresh food, audience, where do you think they said a tomato came from?
A can.
A can.
A can. It's not stupidity, it's ignorance, and ignorance doesn't mean you're stupid. It means that you don't have that knowledge. But they said the peaches came from a can. Now these are 7th graders and 6th graders when we were doing Dinner is Possible back in Houston. So their answer was actually correct. And then we went and told them just like this. Someone plants it, someone waters it, someone has to harvest it. Then once they harvest it, it's got to go to the factory and get processed. And then once it gets processed, it has to be put in a can. And then somebody has to deliver it in a truck. And then the truck has to bring it to the grocery store. And then somebody in the grocery store has to unpack the box. And then somebody has to put it on the shelf.
And we take for granted,
it's 69 cents or under $1. And think about the labor, think about the gas, going from the garden to to the trucks that are going to distribute. I mean, 69 cents to $1, we're very blessed.
And so our scripture our life point number 3 is right attitude. Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as you're working for the Lord and not human masters. If you are somebody that is working and you're picking the tomatoes, it's a boring job. Boring. Watering the tomatoes, putting them through the machine to cut them up, putting them in the can, making sure the cans are all, it's all boring jobs. So you want to have that right attitude. And if we think about the fact that we can go to the store and we can go and buy a can of tomatoes, we should not have anything to complain about. There's people out there that they don't get any food assistance. Yeah. And so we're very lucky and blessed to be in America. And I know for Tim and I, when we've had situations where we are at a place where maybe the money's not flowing, maybe the jobs are not coming, what are we going to do? It's about your right attitude. With that right attitude, and you say, okay, we don't have an answer right now, but how can we go help somebody else? And really, that's how this all started, because during COVID, we weren't working. And we were sitting at home, just like everybody else, and we thought, we need to be out doing something for somebody.
Yeah.
So that's really the key is, having the right attitude, and don't look at the tomato in your cabinet or the can of tomatoes and just say, oh, I have nothing to eat. Be grateful for what we do have.
Well, and the fact is, when you go to the grocery store and you pick up tomatoes, now the least expensive, not because they're not as good, but the least expensive are Roma tomatoes, or up north we call them plum tomatoes. And you can get a pound of those tomatoes for, I don't know, probably $1.29. So a pound of tomatoes is $1.29, and there's, what'd you say, a pound in here?
In the
can, But anyway, so it's just amazing that we have these things available to us.
And they suggest eating tomatoes every day. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just telling you as I was doing research, that's what they said. And so we know it's very important in our health.
Well, talking about important, you're not going to believe what the dessert. Remember, I said you better stay tuned and make sure you stay for the whole show, because this dessert, Kim loves to challenge me. And she said, what are we going to do for dessert? And it's not that every single one of these Think Out of the Can episodes we have a dessert, but
let me tell you why I thought about doing
I want you to know. I want to ask why.
Because, somebody would say, well, what's the point? They're getting food, they should just make it. That's just random. I want you to think outside of the can. I want you to think not just like Tim always says, don't look at a can of corn as a can of corn. Don't look at a can of tomato soup as a can of tomato soup. What else could you do with it?
Mhm.
So if you, off the top of your head, if you had a can of tomato soup, you wanted to make, you had a pasta, what could you make?
You can make spaghetti sauce or marinara sauce because you can add garlic seasoning. You can add, either Italian seasoning or just, dried basil and dried oregano. There's ways that you can flavor it so that it is close to, because maybe you have a pack of spaghetti or a pack of macaroni, elbow macaroni noodles or something.
Or maybe you have macaroni and cheese.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you got Italian. What about if you have ground beef and tomatoes and you got chips or taco shells?
So yeah, you can make tacos.
So you got Mexican, you've got Italian,
You
you've
can
got,
add it to make chili. And it may not be every single ingredient, but again, just be creative with these items that you have.
Yeah.
When COVID hit, and then also when Texas had the great freeze in 2019, I mean, everybody was flipping out. Everybody was panicking, and the grocery stores would be open for just a tiny amount of time, and they had to run and get fresh chicken or run and get fresh whatever. And I'm like, I don't know, even some of the challenged communities that we worked with youth for years, I don't know very many of the homes that we've been in all these years that don't have, a decent amount of items in their pantry.
Well, but let's also face it, that a lot of times when somebody sees a can of tomatoes, they're like, I don't want to eat tomatoes. Well, I don't want to eat
Or
just
what do you,
tomatoes
just plain, what
either.
do you do with a can of tomatoes?
So it's about, don't even look at where you have maybe a can of green beans. I don't like green beans. This is true. People have said, I don't eat that. I don't like that. So how do you either pay it forward?
Just
And-
give it
and
to
I-
your neighbor.
And I'm going to put this challenge out to you. If you are somebody that's receiving food from the food pantry and you're somebody that says, well, I don't eat that, whatever they give me, you pull your car up and you get the food in the back of in your trunk and you get all the groceries and you go home and you go, okay, I don't want these 10 things, but I'll eat this one thing.
Or I still have 4 bags of rice from the last few months because how much rice can you eat or whatever?
So you can take the rice, tomatoes, and you can make a dish. So that's the point of this dish, is why we came up with it, because it's really random.
Yeah, it is random. So anyway, can I go for it?
Yes, go
Okay.
for it.
These are tomato soup cupcakes.
Tomato soup cupcake.
Yeah, okay. So they're going to crack my head open after I go to be with the Lord and find out like what made this weird guy tick as a chef. I think one of the best things I've always said that, the best thing I never did is I never went to cooking school, so I never learned anything the right way. I messed everything up at least twice, learned how to fix it or do something else with it, and that's why I can teach, because I went through not learning everything the way you're supposed to learn it. I learned by doing and messing things up and so on. So these are tomato soup cupcakes. I was very, very concerned, and again, I wouldn't even be showing this today if they didn't come out tasting awesome. I wasn't sure if they would because I didn't know how much flavoring I could put into tomato soup, which is all savory, so that I had a nice cupcake. So.
Well, what's the one thing you discovered? They're doing away with red dye number 40.
Oh yeah.
And so when they do away with red dye number 40, you're not going to have red velvet cupcakes. The color, you're not going to have the color of the red velvet.
And so maybe this would be part of, how they could continue to do that. I don't know. Anyway, so once again, and it looks like the star of the show has been tomato soup. So I'm putting in tomato soup, concentrate, and then I am adding sugar. I'm going to mix it real well. So this is exactly the same way that you would bake any kind of cake. I'm going to add egg. This is just beaten egg.
Soup, egg, really easy.
Make sure it's all fully incorporated. And then I've got flour. And when you put the flour in, and this is one of those things I had to learn. It took me about 10 times to learn. And that is when you put the flour in, especially if you're using an electric mixer, or if you're using like a tabletop, a countertop mixer, you gotta you gotta mix the flour in slowly, because if you start mixing it fast, poof, half of it is in your face and on your clothes. So I'm mixing this slowly until it's all submerged, and then
You will see the ingredients because one of our directors, as they put the whole piece together and they edit it, they're going to put the ingredients on there. So you'll be able to see what all the ingredients are, and be able to know how they're all incorporated.
So there's two ways you can do it, and actually I should have done this, but again, I don't want to throw it out because I didn't do it the way that I always do. You put the liquid ingredients together. Then you put the dry ingredients together, sift them, and mix them evenly. So since I didn't do it, it's okay, no harm, no foul. I have got baking soda in here that I want to make sure gets mixed in. And you can see, you can mix it until there's no lumps.
It's not a lot of
No.
ingredients.
No, not at all. So it's fully incorporated, and it looks like cake batter. I mean, it looks like cake batter. Finally, the seasonings, and I've got a little bit of salt, and I don't care whether they're chocolate chip cookies or angel food cake, any kind of sweets, you want to add a tiny bit of salt, not a lot, so you can really taste it, but it just offsets the sweetness. You need something to just cut a little bit into the sweetness.
So let me ask you, you have cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg. Could they do something different, or what would you suggest?
You don't have to use cloves. I mean, you can use just plain cinnamon if you want. If you have some pumpkin spice left over from, making pumpkin pie back in the Thanksgiving period.
It is about time to have some pumpkin-y kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Seems like you get to this time of year and you're like, what about that pumpkin?
So I can tell you, it smells like regular cake batter. It smells like cupcake batter. And really, that's exactly what it is. So that is the batter. You want to put it into, if you want to make cupcakes, you can make cupcakes. If you want to make a little demi-loaf bread or whatever. And I iced it with regular bought icing because some of the ingredients that are in the food pantry boxes, I see it maybe 3, 4, 5 times a year, are cake mix and icing. So in this case, I used a cream cheese icing. You can use vanilla. I mean, it's up to you what you want to do with it. But these are tomato soup cupcakes. I'm going to tell you something. They are really, really tasty.
So let me ask you, could you make cake mix, the box mix, and add the tomato
Sure.
sauce in there?
Sure. You would just offset whatever the liquid ingredients are, whether it's
oil
milk
and
or
the
water.
egg,
You still want, yeah, exactly.
You'd have to have the egg.
Yes, the egg helps rise, the baking soda helps it rise. And then, basically, since I was never formally trained, and, there's a big difference between, there's chefs that are, they cook regular food, and then there's bakers. There's a big division, not like they hate each other, but you're either a baker or you're, a chef or a cook or whatever. And, I had to learn the consistency of batters when I was baking something, and that's really key. The batter for cornbread is much different than the batter for biscuits, and that's different than the batter for cakes or cupcakes. So eventually you get to learn. And the other thing I do is I always do one test. So I had a 24 mini muffin pan, and I prepped it. You always have to make sure that you lightly oil and flour, whether it's a cake pan or cupcake cups. And so I baked one to make sure that my ratios were correct. And hey, I hit it the first time. But there's times when they don't rise as much, or they'll fall, and so I have to adjust the batter. And that's just trial and error. So when you have something like this, always do one test, put it in the oven, see if it comes out the way you want to, and if not, you have to make the batter adjustment.
So for a family of 4, and you have, you've got 3 dinners.
Well, to review, we have the tomato and sausage and spinach breakfast casserole. We have the grilled cheese and tomato bake, which has the French fried onions on top. You have navy beans with tomatoes, and you have tomato soup cupcakes. So we cost this out. We went out and bought the groceries. This is what you were going to
this
say,
is
right?
exactly what I wanted you to see.
Yeah.
I love
So,
that.
well, Kim asked me. She said, how much did you spend? And I went there and I said, oh, well, the total that I spent was, I forget, $36. Anyway, it came out to, if you divided this by 4, then it came out to $2.30 a portion.
So if you go to McDonald's, anybody, how much, audience members, how much does it cost if you went to McDonald's and bought, hamburger
a number
fries
3.
and yeah, does anybody know? Or chicken. So $12 versus $2.
Yeah,
$2.50?
each one, if you had 4, all my recipes give what the name of it is and then the yield. And so I try to make these think out of the can recipes for 4 servings. And so for 4 servings, this, if divided evenly, it came out to about $2.30 a portion.
So you can have a treat at McDonald's and you can have dinner at home with your family. And that's really what we want to do anyway, right?
So you have something special, right? Oh, you have
We have
your
our last,
final,
our
final...
today's verse is right motive. So right motive, James 4:3, when you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. So right motives, when you ask, you do not receive. What could that possibly mean? If you're asking because you want to just get more, be gluttonous and get more and more and more. But if you're asking because you want to, maybe you want a new bike, but the new bike is going to help you get to work. The motive is where you need to focus your attention. And how do we line up our motives? It's what God wants for us. So I always think of it as, you've got a map, and your map is big. You go to the mall and you've got a map, and you have one little dot that says you are here. And so God knows where you're at. So if you're going to go from point A to point B, you need to make sure that you go in line with him. Otherwise, you end up way over here and he's like, I never told you to go over there. He's got to reroute you back to where he needs you, because he's always growing us to be stronger. He's growing us to be bolder. And I'm telling you, before I got on camera, this was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know if I could do this today. And I just prayed, and I had somebody pray for me, and I just said, Lord, I want you to take over. And he does. He takes over. He gives us the words, and he tells us, what I need to convey to you. And he does that everywhere in life.
Last night she was kind of not stressing, I don't want to say that, but she was concerned that she didn't have her, she usually gets a focus on what she wants to say in addition to the life points. And I just said, stop, don't think about it, and then we'll get there tomorrow, and God will take over.
And he does every time. He takes over. But we don't trust that. So our 4 life points is, number 1 is new day. Proverbs 1:7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Life point number 2, new way. Proverbs 4:23, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. We talked about the new heart. And life point number 3 is right attitude. Colossians 3:23, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as you're working for the Lord and not human masters. And I think about that all the time. We don't get paid to do this. We do it because we want you to be able to use the food bank food you're given. We want to use what we are given because that's what God wants us to do. And our verse today is right motive. James 4:3, when you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend whatever you get on your pleasures. And so it's the mighty tomato today. It's just tomatoes, but it's the mighty tomatoes.
It is the mighty tomato. And so I'm going to say, just always make sure you think out of the can. But Kim has something a little special, and I'm going to step off camera.
And we're gonna take a cut, and we're going to come back to that in just a minute.